Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the show. This is our part 28 of a long series that we've been doing for over a year. But we missed last week, so we had to postpone that. So I apologize for the audience that was hoping to see us last week, but we're here now. We're live streaming on YouTube. I'm going to be opening up the X spaces for the ones that are watching. They can do a call in. It's supposed to be an interactive show. That's what this is supposed to be about. So don't be shy. And then we're gonna also post this throughout the week on my different channels for a replay for the different premieres on the different channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. So for the ones that are watching, please make sure you subscribe to all the channels. Help support the work. And better yet, in the description box, there is a link that I'd like you to click, and that will take you to John's website. And that way you can sign up for his periodical. You can do a reading. We're going to remind you periodically throughout the show to click that link. I will also be posting it in the chat box so people can click that link and go to John's website. So, John, thank you for coming back to the show. A
Thanks
lot has
for
happened
having me.
since, yeah, a lot has happened since the last 3 weeks. So,
Yes, I also want to apologize that I couldn't make it because of an unexpected deadline from a certain magazine that really didn't give me time to do it last Sunday. I had to write this 2,500 word article for them, for the New Dawn, if anyone likes to know. So very, very good magazine for new age alternative media stuff. So I was very honored to be asked, and I'm doing another one for next month. But yes, so lots happening. In fact, since last I saw you, President Trump has changed more things than any president has in 4 years in just 2 weeks. There's and he's had a lot of successes. He's had also equally one of his biggest gaffes in his career, which should see Mike Waltz fired. I have predicted, if you read the Hogue Prophecy report, I have predicted that Mike Waltz will probably be the first person in what I've called the Celebrity Apprentice cabinet, which is pretty much modeled basically after Celebrity Apprentice, Trump's show. I used to watch it all the time, especially the boardroom areas of it. He likes in his boardrooms as well as in presidency. He likes to have he's very Gemini Uranus conjoined here. Lots of surprises. He literally wants to pit some of the people there are stupid. He needs some stupid. He needs some genius. He needs some other things, and just to keep everybody questioning each other. And I sometimes think some of the people has in there are just there to be a necessary irritant to make people think on their feet. And I mean, it is what he had to say. It just shows that it's kind of the karma of him having so many Christian nationalists like Hegseth and Mike Wallace are Christian nationalists, which means they fervently believe that the book of Revelation is about to happen. And their attachment to Israel is very much driven by this dogma of the book of Revelation rather than that, long story short, the idea that they might not even consciously know it, but the whole idea is that they are helping Israel because Israel is supposed to come. The second coming of Christ is imminent, and he is going to announce to them to come home because he is the Emmanuel of the Jewish prophecies. Um, and the other idea they have is the Jews that do not believe in that will be utterly destroyed. So it's not my views. I frankly argue that the preterists are right. The book of Revelations has nothing to do with our times or any times since 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed and Rome sacked Jerusalem, which launched the Christian epoch. It was very much more metaphorical than to be taken literal, just like the book of Daniel. Although the book of Daniel did have some very interesting calendrical ideas that kind of had a lot of people thinking that the Messiah was supposed to appear in what we'd call in Roman calendar 33 AD. So one of the most important parts of that in Scripture is the little apocalypse, as some people call it. It's the only section. It's the Mount of Olives sermon after Christ had been at the temple and said this temple could be destroyed and resurrected in 3 days. And they asked him what he meant by that. And then this is the closest thing we have to actually Jesus making his own predictions. I mean, St. John of Patmos, in his prison cave in the island of Patmos, had basically an angel go between. Christ was not speaking to him directly. He had to go through a go between angel. But this is Jesus talking to his disciples. So it's rather than being 3 steps, it's 2 steps. Jesus talking, the Matthew writing it down, Luke later writing about it. He wasn't there. And I think there's a third apostle in there. It could be John that was also involved. And really the main gist of the little apocalypse, the Sermon of Mount Olives, is Jesus basically talking about a crisis in faith that even in around Matthew 28, I don't have the exact words with me, but what I take away from what I read, reading it not being somebody who has been indoctrinated by Sunday school scholars to look at it, I've always felt that everybody should have a fresh look at these prophecies. If Christ said you should be like a small child, an innocent child, your second birth, then use the intelligence of children to kind of see through all the dogma and go, hey, why is this happening here? There's a section where he said there'll come a time when many of you will be saying, hey, we cast out demons, we did all these great deeds in your name, and why are you forsaking us? And basically Jesus said, you never known me. Get thee hence, you doers of iniquity. And I think the innocent response to that is, it's pretty clear. If you and I and all of us listening right now, if we all just got in a time machine right now and we went back to 33 AD and we're seeing, let's say we land and we're all getting out of our little temporal spaceship, time ship, and we're seeing all these people gathering, buying at a very good price palm fronds. It's such a deal. And they're all waiting, and here comes a man on a donkey, riding a donkey into the gates of Jerusalem, and the palm fronds are being laid down. Now, if we were all standing there and Christ came past us, and as he has his back to us going away, if we yelled, "Hey, Jesus," he might stop, look around, and say, well, what the hell is Jesus? And just keep going. Because the people the person we pray to in Christianity in Jesus' name, he never knew that name. It was Joshua or Yeshua. It was not called that in his life. This is all added later by a religious industrial complex, which is what I call the big religions that are born out of authentic masters. So I think the parts in Matthew are saying, I've never known you. You've never basically done any of this in my name because I'm not Jesus. I'm Joshua. I'm Yeshua, the leader of a Jewish reform movement. that Saint Paul, when he became a disciple after Jesus's death, who was hunting down apostles of Jesus for killing for the Romans, he had a heat stroke on the way to Damascus, not uncommon even to this day. And in that heat stroke, he thought Jesus was saying, why are you punishing me and my people?" And he had what Freud would call a classic. All this hatred is actually repressing a suppressed wanting to do the opposite, love somebody. And so it came out in his heat stroke. And so Saul then named himself Paul and turned and did not he's not the one who is the founder of Christianity. He's the founder of Paulianity. His view of the movement was not to keep it Jewish, but to actually turn it into a Roman religion. And that's why it assimilated eventually so well into Rome when it became Paulianity. And I would call it Paul inanity myself, but it's the faults of sincere men, but misunderstanding men and women that create these are the exoterics that are necessary to establish the temples and the spaces for future generations to have some fragment of memory of the great teachers. But they're always at odds with the exoterics are always at odds with the esoterics. They're in a strange relationship. What often happens in every religion as a religion gets established, the exoterics find the esoterics who are trying to be the Christ consciousness, not worship the Christ over here as a statue or some fragment of his thorns, like these silver-coated thorns that are in Notre Dame, France, right now, the cathedral. They're supposed to be the thorns that Christ wore, probably one of an army of other thorns that were and bones and fingers of Buddha and all of that. Um, the esoterics try to keep the spirit of the master alive. The exoterics keep the global mainstream memory, which is my own teacher talked about it, Osho. He said, and there's this huge debate going on in my own movement of neo-sannyas, which is Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh Osho's movement, which created at the peak over 1 million disciples across the world, which actually is the largest gathering of people that disciples anybody ever had while a master was alive, including Jesus. And so, but now almost everybody has gone kind of back into normal life. Um, and what is happening, and Osho he said it in The Ancient Music of the Pines, one of his books on treatise of Zen. He said, I am creating two kinds of disciples, the exoterics and the esoterics. And inevitably, what will happen is the people, because he was saying, I need both. They're both two sides of a whole. And so everybody was having a debate on Facebook about this. Sannyas and disciples, they're all just saying, "Oh no, we got to defeat the exoterics. We're the esoterics." And so I just stepped in and I said, "Wait a minute. All of you who are arguing are missing the first three important words, which really direct the entire thing that Osho's saying. I am creating. I am creating the exoterics and the esoterics." And because they both perform a necessary friction. And even though Trump is a more instinctive person, not really, he's almost like a millipede. He can't know how to walk 500 legs on either side of himself. He just does it through instinct. He's very instinctive, and a lot of times his instincts are genius and big surprises. But in this way, I think in a more mundane sense, he divides the people he picks around him, whether it's Celebrity Apprentice, whether it's his own boardroom, or whether it's the Celebrity Apprentice cabinet of his second term, Trump 2.0. making sure that there is a certain kind of friction that allows action to happen. And I mean, Omarosa in Celebrity Apprentice got fired all the time, but he always dragged her back into the show because she stirred things up, and he likes that because when people are, it's almost like there anything that Trump does around him, it's like an encounter group. If you look at um, the human potential movement, and he's not. I don't know if he's really cognizant of him doing this stuff, and therefore he needs that friction to throw questions back and forth, and then he decides on his own. But the weakness of this system in a political way is that some of the people he's got in there, like his son-in-law, which in the Hogue Prophecy report for over a year now, I've been warning that the of all the attempts of AIPAC to control the U.S. Congress and Miriam Adelson to buy Trump's presidency so that certain things are done according to what the Zionists want to do. Um, when Trump when he was doing that presser that was just a disaster for him, where he was his energy was low because he was reading it, and I could tell that he wasn't really wanting to read that thing where he says, look, we'll take it. Netanyahu's right next to him, Prime Minister of Israel, and he's saying, look, well, we're going to take it. We're going to own it, Americans. We're going to make it into a beautiful beachfront property. And he's talking about, then people will be able to come there. People can come back. And then he was saying, like, and then it won't be all these things that are going on. There won't be people getting knifed anymore. That is exactly the kind of stuff that Kushner, his son-in-law, who's married to Ivanka Trump, Trump is really close to his daughter. So it's almost, I've been warning, and you who read Hogue Prophecy report know that I said this is the either by chance or design, I don't know, but it's being exploited as blind is his love in her and him. And I think those notes were written by him because it reminds me very much of what several months ago on the Hogue Prophecy Report, I gave you the transcript and the link to Kushner actually making the statement where this one person was saying early in 2094. Wait, who are we in now? I've been just doing a lot of years and a lot of things. No, we're in 2024. So, and it was 2024 early part, which is almost a year ago. And I watched him, and he's sitting in that kind of inscrutable face that he has, and this guy's freaking out about, oh God, this is terrible. This has got to be the worst thing that's going to happen to us. The whole Hamas thing, that we're losing that, and all these people getting killed, and, it's like a genocide, and it's looking really bad for us. And then he's just listening, and he's going, well, very cautiously, coolly, he was saying, well, there's another way to look at this. Um, there's also an incredible business opportunity here. Um, I mean, this is beachfront property, and we could do a situation that would be immensely profitable. And yes, maybe we can get those people out of there. I mean, he couldn't even say Palestinians. Um, and and maybe we'll put them in the Negev desert, maybe somewhere else. That that's not possible for them to live there anymore. It's unlivable. And I mean, if I were there, I said, yeah, you know why? It's because the prime minister of Israel is right next to Trump, is looking kind of, it's hard to explain what his body language and stuff. It's on the one hand, he looks like he's loving it. And the other hand, he's probably thinking, actually, Trump has taken my power away, and now I'm completely beholden to him. My government survives because he's saying we're taking it on. Now, we're going to take the problem from you. That means he owns the problem, And that means Yahoo politically does not own the problem. So so on the one hand, it looks kind of like he's put him in the palm of his hand, but on the other hand, just like Justin, his son-in-law, he can never mention the people, and Trump didn't mention the people, but he did mention in that a number, which is shocking because he said we'll have to move about 1.7 million people out of there. I don't know why they want to stay there. It's just they can't live there anymore. We can place them somewhere else. 1.7 million is what I've already calculated from my sources is how many are left after all the bombing and the starving and all the other things of an open genocide, an open Holocaust on these Semitic people who happen to be Palestinians. This is the biggest Holocaust since the 1940s when other set of Semites were attacked by Nazi Germany. And he he got the number right. The estimates have been that upwards of 600,000 people have died. It's not 46,000. It's at least 600,000 people have perished in the situation in Gaza. So, it's he just obviously Waltz and these people never talk to him, or he's got a lot of he Trump's problem is he's an open channel. I've been saying this since 2015 when I wrote an entire book about his chart, a year before the primaries even started for the presidential elections of 2016. And his biggest weakness, his biggest strength is his kind of instinctive, just surprise, do it spontaneously from left field. And sometimes it works. I mean, he has called this, and it is a revolution that we're in, the revolution of common sense, as he calls it, because he likes to call his instinctive moves commonsensical. And what is interesting about that is actually, I write a little bit about that in the article that I was writing last Sunday, is that common sense, you could say that Pope Urban VIII put under house arrest Galileo, the astronomer, by creating a treatise that actually proved that all that common sense of a couple thousand years that people. Hello? I'm in the middle of the show. I'll see you later when I'm finished. Bye-bye. It's funny. I saw that person was going to call me 2 days ago in the middle of the show. What to do?
Yeah,
The ups and downs of working in prophecy.
that's okay. Don't worry about it. I actually
It's life. Hello, folks.
I like
It's
that stuff.
life. Dandruff on the shoulders, the beard.
Don't worry about it.
It's life. So anyway, but I just had to share it. I knew he was going to call me in the middle of the show 2 days ago. I said, okay, let's see if he does, because he doesn't usually do that. So the Trump channels what's ever in front of him, and that's why I so hope that he gets Kesh for FBI and Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy. I think they're going to pass in. So he will then, because he's got a lot of his Omarosas around him right now, but he doesn't have like the people who are really smart and geniuses who can channel him what's really going down in the world. And he got burned when, the day after, the whole Arab world, the whole Muslim world was up in arms about what he said. And in a way, it's an important lesson to understand and about Trump in these next 4 years. He will keep saying outrageous things. I mean, he basically stepped into that just musing, but it was, again, he was following his son-in-law's idea, obviously convinced him to read the thing. He was out of his center when he did that. But there are two things to understand about Trump, and I've been studying him since 1991 when I got the feeling he was a man of destiny. I didn't quite know what that destiny was, but by the time of the turn of the century, I started to think, my God, I think he might end up being a president of the United States of all things. And so he's a man of destiny. And he I'm writing my opening article for my next Hogue Prophecy Bulletin is to try to kind of square the circle of how this person, kind of on the one hand, has absolutely started a revolution, something really refreshing to me. And I didn't vote for him. I don't vote for anybody to when I'm because that's how I'm able to accurately predict who wins. So for all those folks out there who want to think that saying something positive about Trump means I'm MAGA, and for all those who hear me saying negative things about him, you think that I'm one of the woke Democrats, I'm neither. I'm a majority of one. And in a way, that's why I understand Trump, because he also is a majority of one in a different way. But he follows what he wants to do, whether the whole world's for it or against it. Now, the thing is, the word I'm trying to find is okay, first off, common sense. There are a lot of very commonsensical things that he's talking about, but remember, Pope Urban stood for 1600 years as one of the papacy's popes that believed in the seemingly common sense idea that the earth was kind of flat or just a disc, because people, ships would kind of sink out of sight on the horizon, and they would excuse that to being that the world's not flat, it's just a slight disk. And it made sense if you're looking at the sun moving every day and the moon and all the stars and the spheres of the planets moving around. You could easily think, well, we're not moving because my common sense says I don't see the earth moving. I see everything else moving in the sky, so we must be the center of God's universe. We don't doubt that, because everybody in their little isolated corner of the world thought they were the center of everything, and didn't have any idea that there might be something else. Now, a century before Galileo got in trouble with his accurate revelation of what real common sense is about, um, I stumbled upon the quote of Ferdinand Magellan, the first man who started a circumnavigation from the west around the world, and he was killed in the Philippines during a dispute. It's funny, the two great circumnavigators outside of Sir Francis Drake, the big three, two of them got killed during their circumnavigation. Cook was eaten by cannibals on the big island of Hawaii after they stoned him down trying to talk to them. And then Magellan was killed fighting natives in the Philippines. And so his crew then finished the circumnavigation. But what he wrote down in his logs is, he said, the church can say whatever they like. The exoterics can say whatever they like, but I've watched the eclipse of the sun. I have seen the shadow of the earth, and it is round. So common sense really sinks or swims on whether you have an uncommon sensitivity to see things. I mean, there were people as far back um, as the first century BC, and even farther back, around 400 BC, when what were they, the mariners from the Phoenicians. There was a Phoenician set of galleys that did a circumnavigation of Africa way back in ancient times. They probably left the ancient Marseille colony, which later became Marcellus, Greece, and Marseille, France. one of the oldest ports settlements around. And they went through the gates of Hercules, which is Gibraltar, and they went south. And in their relating, they said they didn't understand how the sky was changing. As they kept going south, there seemed to be no end to the flat earth, but the sun was moving more and more into the northern sky. And then when they got around the Cape Horn of Africa, it was the calendar should have had it be summer, but it was winter. And they didn't understand how that could be. It should be summer all over the world and winter all over the world. And so, they were reporting what they were seeing, but they did not have the insight, or I think perhaps some of them did, because people were recording their ideas that the earth was round. So, but Magellan's now his crew proved it, because if you can't really cross, because the other argument Magellan said is, if I can go from one port here and I can go until I come back to the same port, that proves that the earth is round. It's a sphere. And of course, without him, because he was left buried in the Philippines, his crew proved it true. So it was already getting broken by the Renaissance and this would be the very late Renaissance, when Galileo got in trouble with the Pope. But the Vatican were making it dogma. No, the Earth is flat, and sun moves around uh, us, not the Earth moving around the sun. So, so I'm giving the name of I'm calling Trump's diplomacy chaos diplomacy, creating chaos, because he is very dominated by the planet in astrology, Uranus, that is not only unexpected surprises and rare turns of genius, but it also is the planet that rules chaos. And everybody has a negative view about chaos, which is, if your common sense has a certain insight, unusual insight, how can you be against chaos? Because without it, you wouldn't have order. I don't know what it would be, but if it didn't start with the chaos, of all the dust that's being attracted to each other with a certain happenstance, which is bringing more matter and matter together until it lights up into a, a blazing lava ball. And then out of random chaos, another lava ball the size of Mars just happens to hit Earth as a flame ball. It makes a huge ring of lava that then coalesces into the moon, and we suddenly become a very rare thing in the universe, a binary planet. Where our moon, you look at all the other big moons, they have giant planets, gas planets and stuff in our solar system. We're the only terrestrial planet that has, in the inner part of our solar system, that has a big, massive moon. So we are a binary planet. That has given us unique opportunities for tidal changes, seasonal changes. It has an effect probably on the way our axis tilts. We have an axis shift every 365 days, that is. And and so Trump's chaos creates new kinds of order. And it's very revolutionary. And I think the important thing to measure in Trump is not what silly stuff he says, or uninformed, oafish stuff he sometimes says. Not always. He has that kind of innocence of a child, where he just reads innocently exactly what's going on. When Jeb Bush was next to him, and Jeb Bush had been on a paleo diet, so he looked nice on television, but he was robbed of his energy. And there's Trump going, "You have no energy." Like a child. It's now that's true. That's an innocent common sense that Trump also channels. And he was like, so what he has done so he picks, by the way, he has the legal right to do this. Um, no president has done it because they haven't been such an outsider like him. They've kind of bought into the whole grift scene, Republican or Democrat. And he realizes what he's not saying is that he realizes how he is talking about that we're in such danger of if he hadn't come, we have a chance now not to have a hyperinflation collapse of the United States economy in the next 4 years, maybe next year, because of some of the things he's doing. He knows it's there. Biden literally threw $3.5 to $4 trillion, printed it and threw it into our economy, and literally set the stage for hyperinflation where you might have, if you wanted to buy a cup of coffee, it might cost you $1 million. Just like what happened in Germany when people literally brought suitcases full of German Reichsmark to just buy an omelet. You know, it doesn't last long because it can't. It's so unstable, but it can be devastating. And so what he wants us to do is cut $2 trillion out of the $6 trillion that the United States government wastes. And what he is finding his with Doge, he has a legal right to pick a special envoy who doesn't have to be part of the Congress. That's purely within his rights. His legal people have been very good around him. They have shown to him that, look, you are the boss of the government. You have the power when at your discretion at any moment to hire and fire everyone who is in the government in all of its agencies. That is true. Read your Constitution, you will find. And frankly, Trump's legal team, when they're getting threats, some of the first attempts from kind of woke liberal lawyers and judges to stop what's going on with USAID and about the centralized education agencies next. Um, he they say, bring it on. We'd love you guys to take us to court because we'll go to the Supreme Court because the majority that he has in the Supreme Court has long been complaining that one of the biggest faults that concerns the court, the majority of the court the most, the Supreme Court, is that the government is not being run by the people representatives whom they voted in to run it. It's being run by career politicians, career bureaucrats who write the laws and write whatever they like in the laws, not what the people in the House and Senate voted. And so we're literally got a class of people, and it turns out, just as so happens, that most of it is center left people. I mean, Republicans, whenever they have the rare chance of becoming running the executive branch, it often happens that all the machinery, the employees in Washington, is mostly Democrat Party. So it's not surprising that so many Democrat leaders are freaking out and wanting to stop the audits from happening. I mean, the president has a right to audit anything of that because of what he's running, which is the government, which you and the majority of you gave this president a majority in the Electoral College and a big majority in the popular vote. So he is literally fulfilling his promises. And if anybody's been watching him rather than filtering it through other news agencies that are trying to interpret what he's saying, usually to favor the opposition. But if you just watch him talking, he's a president that's doing everything he's promising. And he did it at the get-go. He jumped right into it. So the Doge people are finding shocking graft and grift, and now the Social Security agency, they're looking in there and they're finding out that rather than your Social Security number being just your number with a special code that makes you only the recipient of that number, they're finding that there's additional numbers that belong to no one, and the money's some to the tone of 200 to 300 billion dollars a year of the trillion that's going to Social Security is going off to who the heck knows, but it's being siphoned out. Maybe it's some of the people, maybe some of the senators and congresswomen of the Democratic caucus that were, torturing that poor security guard in front of the education department or something. I don't know which agency the Doge people were in, and they were there just to disrupt what Doge was doing. Um, and he was just sitting there saying, and they were just going after him. And I wonder if they know what is about to be exposed. And maybe some of these people are getting the grift from it. So the and good news, folks, because it always seems like the one agency that's not going to get hit. Trump has now said this several times today and yesterday. The biggest mess of government misspending, the Pentagon, is next. They're going to audit it, and it's not going to be, oh, we can't account for it. You're fired. If you can't account for it, you're fired. And so it is a revolution. So far, it is a peaceful Jeffersonian revolution, as I've longed, hoped, and predicted it might be for now. But the government's going through an overhaul. I think they're going to reach their 2 trillion cut down of just fat and graft. And it's so established that, and this is decades of this. So this is, I think, a very positive thing. These actions outweigh the abject stupidity of what he said about the Gaza Strip. And frankly, another part, I'll close with this this rant, with is that the art of the deal, if you read it, he's following his chaos has a certain order to it. He always starts off with saying something outrageous, demanding aggressively something outrageous, scaring the people who want to do business with him. I mean, there's a part in the art of the deal where Trump was really the right guy who ghost wrote it for him. Relates in his own stories how like Trump came into the board and he was screaming, yelling, and pounding on the door and terrifying everybody in the board of Trump Incorporated. And the guy was there to watch it. And then as they walked out, Trump completely changed and was smiling. Like he was like, and then he suddenly, as soon as they got into the elevator, he's smiling and laughing. He said, well, I really scared him that time. It reminds me of one of my favorite moments of Fritz Peters in his stories growing up with Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was this great 20th century mystic who died in October 29th, 1949. But he was born in the Russian Empire. He was an Armenian Greek citizen of the Russian Empire from Kars. And some of you might know of him from the movie Meetings with Remarkable Men. That was about him. That was his first book. That was based on his first book of the journeys they made to try to collect. Him and other Russians and other members of the Russian Empire went traveling all over Central Asia, the deepest areas, to try to collect or try to find the last mystical groups and traditions before the modern industrial world gobbled them up. And they did find them. And Gurdjieff in the process became enlightened. But there's this great story where one of his head people that was running the Gurdjieff groups in America, this is the early 1920s. Fritz is coming in, and he was basically his valet in his room, Gurdjieff's room. So he's coming in with the coffee from the kitchen, so he's walking in. And he's got the tray, and the way it's set up is Gurdjieff is over on one side, and the guy who's running it, I can't think of his name. He was literally pale. He was taking it. He was being a watcher of it, but he was like pale and sagging up against the windowsill. And Gurdjieff was like, "Yo, rah, you gonna die, you die," and just really, really tearing him apart. And in a tremendous rage. So here's this little kid. He's walking into the part of it, and he puts the tea down, and in the middle of it, just as he's going, thank you. He just completely dropped the rage and was like, thank you. And then went back. So that's when he realized, my God, what a device that guy is creating here. He's really tearing this guy apart. But it was a device to help. Sometimes masters hit their disciples, sometimes things happen. It's sometimes you get a guy who comes in to sit before Joshu, the Zen master, and he says, I think a lot about enlightenment. What do you think about enlightenment? And Joshu's response was to get up out of his chair, seize the man, pull him up from his cross legs, seize the man, and run him backwards towards the second story window. And they both went out the window. They broke through the window, fell down to the floor with Joshu on top of him, still holding him, a few fractures, and he's looking at the man, utterly shocked, but shocked right out of his intellect, shocked into a zone where he was in the state of no mind. And Joshu just simply says, get it? Guy said, and the guy got enlightened. Even a guy totally lost in his intellect, who can only think about and muse wonderfully about pictures of rice cakes rather than eat the real rice cake. Well, this guy had to be this intellectual had to be thrown out the window, hitting the floor, breaking a few bones, and it works. So sometimes it's worth it. I mean, the other extreme story that was famous in Zen stories is there used to be one master who would always speak, and he had this way, whenever he would speak, he would put his index finger up in a certain way. And now his servant, this boy, Chila, a young monk, the kid used to behind him do a perfect impersonation of him, pointing the finger, and everybody had to not laugh but he would do it. So one day, the master pretended not to know anything was going on, but he did one day for one discourse. He took a knife out of the kitchen and put it in his pocket of his robes before he came down and sat and did a lecture. And at the moment that the kid was doing that behind his back, he pulled out the knife, grabbed his hand, and cut off his index finger. The child went, ah! And he went, wait, stop, just be now. And so in the shock, this boy became enlightened. It was like, so, masters can be dangerous, real ones, as well as fake ones. But the key is having the common sense to distinguish between the two. Now, Trump is not a master, except he is kind of a master of chaos. It's possible that Trump is the kind of person that might even surprise us all and become enlightened, being the complete, sometimes odious person he can be, but also being the breathtakingly Uranus being a surprise. His Uranus and Sun. Yeah, I'll finish on this. We have somebody waiting to ask something. The Gemini, he's a Gemini. So he's got the twin. So he's got that dichotomy going on. That opposites attract and repel inside of him all the time. But it is conjoined Uranus, the king of original ideas, sudden surprises, and chaos. So chaos is part of his device. It's he got to destroy stuff before he can build his buildings. But what saves probably him and all of us is it's also the Uranus and the Sun Gemini is also conjoined the true north node. So man has remarkable luck. And so hopefully that luck will save him and us from the times when he really sticks his foot all the way up his mouth, like he did. But so far, if you give a litmus test of the things he's done, he's fulfilling his promises. He's literally in the last 2 weeks done more change to the United States government than any president has ever done in 4 years. And so we are in this roller coaster ride. And as well as he's doing these great changes, which could end up being really good for us in the long run, he also says dumb stuff about the Palestinian Holocaust. But he's just thrown everybody crazy in the Middle East, and now he'll come with a real deal because that's what he does. He throws you off your center, and then he comes with a real deal, and then you're ready to say yes. That's how he does it. So I am done now.
Okay, so just to remind everybody that's watching live stream either on my website or on YouTube, I have the link for X Spaces in the chat if you want to actually call in and ask a question. The ones that are in X Spaces right now, just request for the mic and I will hand off the mic to you and you can ask a question live. We have 3 questions that have been typed into the chat, so I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to read it verbatim here. Paul and John, both your thoughts on the novel The Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood. I haven't read it, so I don't know.
I don't know either. Sorry. Maybe you can email me and describe it to me, and then maybe I can talk to you later about that.
All right, that was from Darren. Darren also has another question.
Hey, Darren.
A comment.
Darren.
Darren liked the phone call during the show. So okay, so the next question is thank you for bringing this information to the public, Mr. Hogue. How do you see the astrological alignment of the planets? I hear has been in this configuration since 1776. So I guess what's your take? I guess the question is, what's your take about the astrological alignments that are associated with the 1776 alignment?
Oh, well, yes, it's a return, this lineup that actually happened around the inauguration period. It's been kind of developing over a few months where you have I believe it's Mars and Saturn, and then Jupiter, and then Venus, and the moon, all lining up. And it's not just these are a really pretty show, but the planet we can't actually see has been even more significant. And I've been writing about this since 2021. In that when Pluto which was at the 29 degrees Capricorn at the moment of 1776, July 4th, birth of the nation. And it's important to understand, I said this before, that the woodcut showing Liberty Hall and the bells ringing and people dancing in the street has the clock saying 2:21 p.m. So that, as far as I'm concerned, especially since I've used it, it's my prediction has been much more accurate about the American birth chart, is that it's not Gemini, it's Scorpio rising at 8 degrees. Very interestingly enough, the sun sign of the European Union is 8 degrees Scorpio. So again, if America sneezes, Europe catches a cold. It really shows the master vassal relationship with the EU, which is just a glorified satellite of us, the US. It keeps the motto going along with NATO, which is keep America in, keep Germany down, and keep the Russians out. That's the motto of what NATO and the EU has been about. Well, that is all going to change. I'll hold on that for a moment. It's actually Europe is eventually going to head east again towards Russia, and this time they will solve their problem, and it won't be an invasion. It'll be a coming together of commerce and peace and prosperity, and that will end this terrible habit of Europeans that started 700-800 years ago in the year 1242, when the Teutonic Knights were the first of many bloody invasions of Russia up to the encroachment of NATO of recent history. But now, the planet that's far more significant is Pluto in this. We can't see it with the naked eye, but Pluto has literally defined in one orbit the life cycle of the first American Revolution. And starting in 2021, and 7 times in like a wrecking ball, going direct course, and then Pluto retreating back over the NATO position, then going direct course. It has in 7 strokes, the last one being just before the election, but literally the degrees of such was hardly changed on November 5th. These 7 strokes have brought the end of, in a very Scorpio rising way, of the death of the first American Revolution, and now the void has to be filled by a second American Revolution, which is now happening. That has started really to take off at November 5th, when by the time of the 20th of November, Pluto left Capricorn and will not return to it again for 248 years, the life cycle in the Plutonian orbit of the United States of America. And we are now seeing the death of the old America and the rebirth of a new America in this process. And I don't think anybody, including Trump, would have picked himself to be the catalyst for this, but here we are. This is what, and it is probably perfectly, George Washington wouldn't even be recognized if he was walking down the streets of the United States right now. So it needs somebody from our time to launch it. I often think, though, that Trump is the 4 years that creates the big hole in the ground, the destruction of the old. He is the foundator. He is the foundation of this revolution, but he is not the person that will build the new America over this foundation. That will be the people who follow him. And he started it. He's the wrecking ball. And maybe J.D. Vance, maybe some of the Trump sons, or maybe the MAGA movement is going to move from a red baseball cap to a purple baseball cap, because it's going to end up being, it can at least, its potential is to end up being a major American party. In fact, they may call themselves eventually, down the years that are coming, the decades that are coming, to make this revolution. It'll be slower than it was. It'll take more time than the American Revolution did, because we have more baggage from the last 248 years. Now this new 248-year cycle, I think it's 2277 when it finishes again. We will either see a new America born, or this America will break up. And that will, between now and Pluto's return, now that it's in Aquarius. You see, when it was in Aquarius before, was just the year after the 29-degree Capricorn happened. It's right at the end of the house of transit. So the American Revolution had started the year before 1776, but like a lot of wars and revolutions, it sometimes takes them time before they really engage. Like it took people to think of World War II as World War II. It took 2.5 years from the Polish invasion by the Nazis and the Soviet occupation of Eastern Poland. All of that was in 1939 in October, but it wasn't until the end of 1941 that everybody realized that this was a global world war, when Hitler, who was on the doorway of Moscow in this massive invasion of the Soviet Union in December, was having a counterattack of the Russians there. At the same time, on the 7th of December, 1941, when Japan invaded or bombed Pearl Harbor, America declared war on Japan. Adolf Hitler, 2 days later, declared war on America, and then it was a world war. Everybody could agree on that. Well, in a similar way, the American Revolution really took off when the theoretical ideas of Capricorn. One of the ideas of Capricorn is it's the architect. It's the architect of political movements or religious movements as much as it is an architect of constructing a new business or things like that. So it's theoretical. It's in the petri dish. But when Pluto moves into Aquarius, it becomes activated on the streets in reality. So we were lucky to have our little revolution, and but it was really all the fighting, the blood that was shed to make it happen was when Pluto was in Aquarius. Similarly, it touched the French, who were very interested in what we were doing. Even royals were interested. I mean, we even had aristocracy fighting alongside us, like Lafayette. Um, by 1789, it moved. Pluto in Aquarius triggered the revolution that would spread the ideals of the American Revolution all over the world over the next century of modern democracies. And a century of revolutions were caused by it. And so that return of the cycle of the French Revolution is coming back, and it'll be 4 passes of Pluto over its natal birth position during the storming of the Bastille on the 14th of July, 1789. That will happen, and that will create. So this revolution is just getting warmed up, and in time we're in the 2030s, it's going to be between 2034 to 2036. It's going to become a global phenomenon. It's going to be not just America in the core of it, but it's also going to be people in Europe rebelling against the breakdown. One of the things that people don't understand is in the last few weeks, Donald J. Trump ended the American hegemonic era. He is redefining America's position in the world as a sphere of influence that will be a sphere of primarily North America. He'll attempt South America, but a lot of South America is going to be in the influence of the BRICS. Some of it he'll keep, and really, even Prime Minister Trudeau, he it got on a mic just yesterday or today where he was talking to Canadian businessmen, and he was saying, if he pulls away all the money that we take from America annually, what, 200-300 billion dollars, we will be absorbed in the United States. The Canadian country will not survive it. So, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but there's a real chance Canada is going to be absorbed into a greater North American America, as is Greenland. These things are probably going to happen, and it fits with his concept of Trump's concept of Fortress America. So he's indirectly telling the world he's pulling the plug on hegemony. He's pulling the plug on the 800. When they start auditing how much money it costs us to keep these 800 bases across the world where the sun never sets on an American weapon that doesn't work, it's too expensive. That's all rolling up. You're going to see in the next 4 years probably most of those bases closed, and we kind of consolidating our military into just protecting America. One of the reasons why, up until the moment Trump came into office, that the United States Armed Forces was at a deficit of people wanting to be part of defending this nation is a very simple reason why that's happened. American men don't think that they're fighting for America anymore. They're fighting for corporations, fighting for Haldebaran or whatever, fighting corporations, dying in Iraq, dying in these places, dying in Afghanistan, not for America's threat or anything. So it is interesting to note that when Trump was elected, there was a flood of men who wanted to serve their country again. But what they'll be serving is just defending the United States of America and its spheres of influence. And already the scuttlebutt in China and with Xi and with Putin and all is that we're going to see kind of a rearrangement, which will, it had, every political arrangement has its ups and downs. But one thing that great powers, rather than having an uber power running the world, is very destabilizing. If we get back to the great power idea, where the powers are motivated to have uh, their vested interests protected by not crossing lines with the other vested interests, that will bring a stability to the planet that we haven't had for a long time. And it could very well lead to an end of a lot of wars. So that's the other thing I wanted to get in there, is that in a few weeks, Donald Trump has already done it, and it's my job as a prophecy person to tell you, here's the moment it got conceived, folks. You probably won't be told about it for another 3 or 4 years. Just like World War II started. Frankly, it didn't start with the invasion of Poland. I'm going to argue that it started with the invasion of Japan into China, which was a big opening blast, but because of the certain biases the West has had about history, no one in the West considered what the Chinese were suffering to be of any importance. Now that China is probably more important than most of those same Western nations, now I think it's time to realize that the real date of the beginning of World War II was in 1937, when China was invaded by the Imperial Empire of Japan. And so, and ironically enough, the final campaigns of World War II were in Manchuria, with a vast Soviet invasion that even the West were shocked they were able to pull together, of like 3 million men and 3,000 tanks, 6,000 planes, overwhelming a massive set of Chinese armies that were landlocked, couldn't get back to China those final months because the ships were all sunk by us. And so it started big in China and it ended big in China. So I'll be writing kind of a revision of that in some of my future Hogue prophecy reports. Now we have one left after I
All
got
right,
Marion
that
right
last
now.
question was by Anthony, and Anthony has another question.
Okay.
And where do you see AI impact in your readings? Is it a new nuclear age, a danger? Question mark.
Well, that's a good way of phrasing it, because I have been for 20 years now writing about that there are three major dangers for the future of the human race. It depends on how wise we are not to stumble into them. The one's the obvious one, the threat of nuclear war. The other is the more disputed one, but I have been over 50 years aware of it coming, even though it seems like a lot of really idiotic people are trying to convince the world that climate change is real, but they're so silly about it that they should just be quiet, because they're really doing, throwing tomato soup at artwork and just getting everybody to get an electric car and think, oh, I'm saving the world now as I'm driving my electric car that I have to put the plug in every 3 or 4 hours, thinking, and none of you know that most of your electricity, where does it come from? Coal, fossil fuels. It's just a joke. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for new technologies, electric cars, hydrogen cars. If you don't want to do it for the problem of global warming, we've got a completely polluted planet. Whether that pollution is actually influencing the climate or not, we can dispute that. But I agree with Governor Schwarzenegger. The real thing we should be talking about is not saving the whale or the mullet, the stunned mullet, that they're pouring all the water out of California for to keep it alive. This world is very much polluted and poisoned, and on the oceans are a mess with all the stuff we're throwing into it, and we should clean it up. So, so yeah, I mean, so the third problem, so global warming, and I'm one of the last people who still call it by the politically incorrect phrase global warming, because that's what it is. If your Earth is suffering a fever, there are some regions that will catch a chill. That's why some places get colder in this kind of thing. But if you look at the whole map of it, it's always getting warmer on the aggregate going up more and more. But that's another subject. The thing that I've also been very much warning about, I think it's the most dangerous, is the move of people who are not wise, people who mistake intellect for wisdom, to put artificial qualifying intelligence, AI, and not see what utter stupidity that is. Intelligence is not artificial. Fake, phony, pseudo. I call it the human race is potentially numbering in its ranks a whole lot of Dr. Frankensteins. The Frankenstein syndrome, I call it, where um, they they're too dumb to realize that in all their muscular thinking, meatheads they are, that artificial intelligence, intelligence can never be made artificial. Otherwise, it'll be like an artificial human. You put the bones and the body parts together, you zap it with some electricity, and you put somebody else's brain in the thing, and you've got something that's not as funny as Young Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite movies. I know it by heart, all the jokes. But you get Shelley's Frankenstein. Mrs. Shelley's Frankenstein monster. Where is the classic thing is the Dr. Frankenstein ends up trying to save his monster, and he's destroyed by his monster as his monster destroys him. And that is our future if we continue down artificial intelligence, like Elon Musk once warned. He said, "I'm afraid we are summoning the demon." If you have something artificial that looks, thinks, talks, acts like it's alive, uh, and you're okay with that, then you are a servant of death, your death, and the human race's death. It's just as simple as that. I mean, I give you examples. I've seen firsthand in my own life what artificial intelligence can do. I wrote a book called What Really Happened Hillary Rodham Clinton, which was looking at why, really the story I've been in both of her terms of running for president, how no one defeats Hillary Clinton more than she defeats herself by being an awful politician. I looked at her kind of sympathetic because she's a 12th house Scorpio, just like me, just like a lot of Biden too. And she has a very similar chart to mine. So I can commiserate with her blind spots that she didn't have enough awareness to see. Also, she tried very hard not to get an ascendant chart made of her, but I figured out what her ascendant is Scorpio. And anyway, I wrote a book, and what I wrote in it was how she wrote her book, What Really Happened. And at first, when it came out, the Amazon, it was just diving. It was all getting one stars, just utterly going down. And then suddenly, magically, she suddenly was getting 4.5, 5 stars. And so they rigged it because, Bezos is a Clintonite. And so they rigged it. And so I pointed out that they rigged it. So here I am on Amazon pointing out how Amazon rigged something. And then I had the evidence. And then I said, but if you look at the part that says the most read reviews, suddenly, and I pointed them out, here they have like 80,000 people, 120,000 people, like big reviews. And they're all just saying, a lot of them were saying, I don't know why you keep wanting my opinion, because every time I give you my opinion, and I have read Hillary's book, you Amazon people shut me out. And what's shutting them out is a similar program that suddenly came to me with a very threatening words. It really was traumatizing because I was being told, if you don't change this book and change the way the cover is, we will take this book and ban it. And then they, just to add scare to it, they for about 3 days, all my books on Amazon, 40 books at the time. No, they took them offline. And it dawned on me, first I was doing the human habitual thing. I was thinking, well, this guy's a real nasty guy. Who is this person? And then it dawned on me something, a true horror to me. It was horrifying. It's a machine. The person that is ruining my living life is a monster that's pretending to be a human being, assaulting me, threatening me. And it's just ones and zeros. It does. And I felt, I'd rather have the door in the middle of the night being knocked on by a KGB agent who drags me out and roughs me up. At least I'm dealing in a not very nice relationship and could mean my doom, but at least it's human on human. I see a time where such robotic, soulless, existenceless pretenses could knock on my door and do the same thing because I am alive, and it is not. It's just artificial. So that is the greatest danger to our future. The making everything virtual could ultimately move to an attempt to even make enlightenment something that's virtual. It would be a literal creation of the thing that I love the Zen master saying, because I often come across it a lot when I'm dealing with people that have not yet dropped their intellectual pursuit of the great mystery. They can't, and sometimes some of the people we're talking to on this show are brilliant intellects, but their intellect it's very hard for them to understand that they have to watch the intellect. They are not going to be able to think their way through this mystery. I know, because I've gone through this process. One time Osho said, after a really beautiful book called Only One Sky, which looked at the pink lotus tradition of these masters like Milarepa, Marpa, of the Tibetans, the tantric masters. But at the end, it really disturbed me. It's my early days when I was just reading and thinking about Osho, and it disturbed me in a good way. He said, now, at the end, he says, now there's come the time, because he was really framing things that were in words that were like taking me beyond the intellect. But it ended with him saying, now it's time to put the book down and take a jump beyond the mind. It's good the book's got you here. Now it's time to put the books aside and really begin. And it basically, what happens is, it's most people stop just intellectually frigging about this stuff, and they never get beyond it, because because what the Zen masters would say when they had such people like Joshu had, where he had to help him by throwing himself and the man out the second story window to get his attention, to kind of create a gap, if you will, of all this going on. He Masters like Joshu and Nansen and those people who used to say, "Ah, that's a very beautiful picture of a rice cake you are describing. Beautiful picture. Might even be more pretty than the actual rice cake. But you can't nourish your soul eating pictures on paper of rice cakes." Meaning, you can picture the rice cake, but you have to face the rice cake to eat it, to absorb it, to digest it. You will never, never find any progress to this if you just are left with this pretty picture of the rice cake called this mystery.
All right, so we have a request for someone to, I guess, ask a question via X Spaces. So Mary, if you could just unmic and ask your question.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you, John.
Hi, Mary.
Paul. Hi. This is fun. I have a question. If you would think about this and answer it for me, but I'm thinking about the author Ennio Flaiano. He was a post-war Italian author. He worked with Federico Fellini to write La Dolce Vita and 8.5. And I'm thinking about people still like finding hope and love among all of these great changes that are going on in our world. All of the outer planets changing positions, the possibility of like being on the cusp of seeing a world that we don't even know what it will look like. But yeah, how do you look, or who do you look to in the past? I was looking at this like post World War II Italian revitalization.
Yes, I love the revitalization.
Ideas of like how do people find hope in all of this?
Well,
Thanks.
okay, Mary. You had any more thing to ask?
I mean, for sure, but I would just like to hear.
Let us start, Mary, with this, because first off, I love La Dolce Vita and La Strada, and I'm really into that period, and and a lot of that was all ruins because literally it was all bombed out because the end of World War II. So the people, the Italian art forms, they had gone through fascism, they dumped the fascism, and then the Germans came in and occupied them, and then Italy became a battlefield. And so, in a way, things catalyze other things. Hopelessness catalyzes hope. Uh, the the destruction of the old can create new art forms, like what happened with the Dolce Vita and what Fellini did, and Amarcord. I don't think the writer you're talking about did Amarcord, but I also love that one too. So the other issue is hope. The important thing is to go deep into things. And that's why when I do my readings on one-on-one, like we're doing this now, but just you and me, and anybody who wants to get a reading, there's the information that's at the bottom of the page. And what I like to do is help people find the tools to see deeply into things by not being of the things. For instance, it's understandable why we all hope for a better world, but I have learned through being a observer of the mind and the body and the world from a space that is not changing, not moving, a space that you only find in the most ordinary place of your life, here and now. In fact, this thing is not some great, massive thing. It is ordinary, so profoundly ordinary and unique as a birthright. Your Buddha nature, your nature to be aware, an aware one, your Christ consciousness. It's so ordinarily yours that it's so easy for developing ego and mind and hopes and fears and stuff as a child. It's easily forgotten, but you cannot lose it, Mary. You cannot. It is you. It is me. It is the source. Call source the God. Call source a luminous point of atheism. Call the source um, a godliness, as my master Osho used to call it. But there are certain techniques that I've learned and worked with since 1980 that have helped me become aware of that which never changes in us, the source. And it, when you start to feel that, when it becomes part of your waking and sleeping consciousness. You're 24/7. The thread of watching. That's what meditation really means. It doesn't mean mindfulness. Full of mind is the problem. Calling it meditation doesn't change the fact you're full of mind. But the thing that I'm talking about is no mind fullness. The no mind is not the mind. I mean, it doesn't have a name, but one needs a name just to make some dialectical hint of it. You can't really speak about it, actually, because the part cannot speak about the whole, the source. Waves can debate about what their shapes mean and how they slap and splash each other in war and peace, love and hate and all that. But the waves are stuck in the idea that they are waves, and they don't look inside to the very ordinary reality that they are the cosmic ocean, have always been, have always will be. And the cosmic ocean never dies, because, you know, people used to come to me and say, will the existence stop making souls? Well, that point of view is a point of view of a question that looks at things in separation, not in its holisticness. And so my answer to that, I said, I would reframe your question as my answer. Can the ocean ever stop making waves? No. It'll always make waves. There's no end to the waves, because the shapes are only a temporary limits that we have been trained by our ego processes to think of as different things, that separate from the whole. And the term being separate from the whole comes from the root word, ancient Greek word, idios, which means we come in as Buddhas, and then within the process between 7 and 14 years old of education of the ego, we all are turned into idiots. I came across this idea when back to Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff used to, when he would talk to his disciples in the collective, if they had a group that had to do something, okay, you idiots over here, you're going to dig the ditches. And all of you idiots over here, you're going to make food for our evening meal. And and they understood it as not an insult, because he told them the true nature of what idiot means is the illusion of being separate from the whole is what causes everybody so much misery. It's identity on something that is simply not true. And so when people say, sometimes they say, you don't give me any hope. And I said, that's true, I don't. But I'm not giving you any hopelessness either. See, I have no hope for our future. Therefore, I also have no hopelessness about our future. Can you see how that changes the way things are perceived? Can you see how hope, as noble as it is as a dream, hides hopelessness? That intelligence goes hand in hand with ignorance. That love goes hand in hand with hate. But the thing in us that can feel its presence when hope and hopelessness have been negated, that is another state of being. It's transmoral. It's transcendental morality. It is the witness. It is what dhyana in Sanskrit means. The root word for meditation is not to contemplate. Dhyana means to be a witness of the mind, of the emotions, of the constant, wonderful, horrible world that is floating around us and changing around us. Because if we never question this, see, real meditation, you start really questioning things you don't question. Why is it that we are aware of things changing? I mean, I used to have a brown beard. Now it's turning wizard white. I used to be a boy. Now I'm a few months into my 70th year. Why is it the animals don't seem to sense change? They just live what's ever happening, suffering or wagging tail, whatever, until death comes. why is it that people are given this curse? Some would call it a gift. A gift is a curse. The two sides again, hope and hopelessness, seen by a third possibility that annihilates itself into a fourth. I'll get in that later. Um, so the witnessing, if one can start to witness things, and there's techniques I've learned that are very helpful for people living in our times that are amplified in the mind more than other times. They're very playful and they're very wonderful, and it's actually can be quite simple to kind of reconnect with something so ordinarily universal like enlightenment that you miss it because you seek it, and you cannot seek something you already are, but you can then use techniques to get out of your own way, watch yourself as your own movie, and discover who's watching the movie is the mystery. So the world is changing. To your other ideas, Mary, the world is changing. The world's going through a revolutionary time, and much will be destroyed as much will be created anew. And the mind is always seeking a finality. It's always seeking a curtain to the movie that we can all applaud. But the mind can only be trapped in that idea because mind only exists in a horizontal world that most people exist in now, live and die in it, and never recover memory of that seed of eternity that is given to them. Now, Gurdjieff used to have a different way of talking about it. My master Osho was opposite in his techniques to Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was about work and effort. Osho was about let go. But it takes a lot of work to let go in its own way. But Gurdjieff used to say, especially because most of his disciples were Russians, and Russians are very obsessed about the soul because in a way they're very soulful people. So, but he had a great and compassionate device. He used to say to them, "You soul, you talk about soul. You don't have a soul. You don't have a soul at all. You have to earn your soul by becoming more aware of your body-mind mechanism. In that watching, you create soul that could survive your body-mind vehicle, just being a vehicle of happenstance." That what he used to say is, people would say, "Are you ever disappointed in people?" And Gurdjieff would say, "No, because I simply understand that people are all shit." And then he'd say, "So when people are not behaving like manure, I'm always surprised." So his was, "No, you have no soul." Now, Osho's said the same thing, but with different words. He says, "You do have a soul. You definitely have a soul. But if you live every life never watering it, never feeding it a space where it can crack out of its dead shell and become your full potential, you might as well not have a soul. You have a soul, but it's inert." It's the same thing Gurdjieff is saying. So different masters have different ways of saying, because of their karmas and because of the lives they've lived and the memories they've collected. And that's why many masters argue with each other. And this argument is their play. It's not really arguing with themselves. They're not a personal person anymore. They're not a sound through a mask, a person, a persona. And so they'll either argue with each other or they'll just sit there looking at each other and giggle and say nothing. And their disciples will be very upset because you're supposed to say something. Well, if I said something, he would know I wasn't enlightened because we're beyond all that. So yeah, it's the wonderful thing about our times is live Mary as an alchemist. The whole alchemist movement in the Renaissance was just a game to keep the Inquisition from burning people who were literally doing the real alchemy, which was transforming their base metal potentials as a human being into the gold of enlightenment. They kept the church away, the greedy church who needs more money, and they kept the politicians away and the kings from burning them and stuff, because they say, oh yeah, we're working on a way to create gold out of lead, gold out of iron. And of course, well, I hope we'll give you even some money for this, because, then if you've got the Midas touch, then you'll be able to touch whatever we need to keep the church going and everybody down into our faith, and so forth and so on. But that was all their sophisticated ruse. They were about the alchemy that enlightened masters talk about, the alchemy of you. Gurdjieff would say, not being a man or a woman with quotation marks of ego. Drop the quotation marks. Be a man, be a woman, as you are. And so at the end of Gurdjieff's life, he had tried to create his commune and had it constantly blown away and buried by the turbulence of the 20th century, first half of the 20th century. I mean, World War I took away a couple of attempts. The Russian Revolution took away a couple of attempts. He ended up in Paris, and then an auto accident he was in made it impossible to sustain the finances for the whole thing, which he did totally from his power of his own dynamo-like being. And so he started to arrange Gurdjieff groups in France and in America, and then he was trapped in the occupation of the Nazis in Paris. And when it was all said and done, some of his disciples, just before he died in 1949 at 86, I think, they used to come and commiserate with him and say, man, you tried so hard, but every time you got something going, it got destroyed. Do you feel like you failed? And he says, no, you don't understand my work. I need chaos. I need upheaval. Sometimes upheaval is where order comes. Chaos is where order is born. Right? Like I was saying a few hours ago with Trump. I mean, use Trump as an agent of chaos and alchemy, and it could, if it's done right, transform the United States back to its values, back to its constitutional beginning in a second American Revolution. So he was basically saying, and he said, look, when times are happy and times are mellifluous and sweet, people go to sleep. This world is a place to learn. Everybody, no matter how many planes you end up resting a while from this place, you all always come back to this first plane, because this is where it all happens. This is where the transformations happen. And so the way this classroom Earth is set up is to have a full spectrum of beautiful and terrible things potentially happening in life. And the thing that's wonderful about times of revolution, times of disruption, or they can be alchematized into some advantage. It doesn't mean they're nice, but life is about the art of life is how you embrace what life throws at you, how you take it up as a challenge to grow. And if you're just looking to be in a sleepy little cuddly future, well, they'll happen, but in those futures, you're not challenged. Most people are fine with that. There's nothing right or wrong about that. It's the suchness of the reality. However, for those who have been traveling through many lives and have been trying to seek something that they know that was their very nature, but this treasure had been lost every time they come back, they somehow manage to lose the thread of eternity. When times get bad, a lot of those people, when they lose their Ozzie and Harriet paradise, they suddenly are thinking, there's got to be more to my life than just seeking happiness and just being comfortable and just doing. There's got to be something more. There's got to be something I'm missing. And those are the people, because of revolutions and depressions and things like that. And those are the people in the post-war Italy that started to rethink cinema, are people who start to, or go even in deeper things. these are the people that start coming out of their own kind of walking zombie state. You know, we love zombies and zombie movies for the simple reason that most people on this planet live like zombies. They are just moving from here to there, dreaming that they are awake, dreaming that they are real, and in fact they're not. And so I'll hopefully you'll say thanks for the tip, like the zombie will say in the joke. But but for Mary and everybody listening to this, um, take life as a challenge. Take life as a challenge to grow. And if life throws things at you, it's an opportunity to really see what matters, what's eternal, and what is just something to be endured or enjoyed in both cases, while you walk through this life until you as a wave disappears back into the ocean. Only this time you don't come back as a wave. Or if you do, you don't forget the ocean, and your waviness might help others as well as yourself.
Oh, if I may, that was beautiful. And I wanted to ask if you believe then in the alchemy of retrocausality, or since you were talking about the ocean and idiots and different things that people do, would I be like an idiot to keep diving into the ocean trying to something
Well,
there, so to speak?
well, I mean, Mary, one thing is it often happens that if you start to see how you incarnate and like an idiot keep coming back as something separate from the whole, in just the awareness of doing the process, this often creates a breakthrough. You know, it's like if there's a dog who's chasing after Buddha's tail, and the dog is chasing and chasing. Every once in a while, the dog bites the end of Buddha's tail, but he feels excruciating pain and stops and feels like like he's been bitten and he doesn't understand. Now he's running in circles around and around and around every life, chasing his tail. And there's this wise old dog who's watching him, and he kind of looks and sees him, and he keeps running, 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 trying to get that tail. And and the guys, and finally he's looking, he said, "What are you looking at?" As he's running. He said, "I'm busy here. I'm trying to catch Buddha's tail." And he says, "Oh, I used to do what you did. It's okay. It's just what you're doing. It's not judging it actually makes it worse, whether you try to argue and it's for it or against it. I'm going to give you some breathing techniques, and you just keep doing what you're doing. If you try to stop what you're doing, you'll just repress it and do something else. So the doing is the problem, but I'm going to just give you a breath technique that as you keep running after your tail, you'll find in the center, you begin to relax and see the bigger picture of what you're doing. And so he took it on, and suddenly he realized as his consciousness expanded, he saw the bigger picture of what he was doing, and what he became a seer of a bigger reality. And the reality was that where was Buddha? There's never been a Buddha. It's just him chasing his own tail. Oh, that's why it hurts when I catch it sometimes. It's my tail. I must the only Buddha I can find is my own self. The Buddha nature in a dog, which even dogs have Buddha nature. I upset some people years ago when I said that, and I had Buddhist people say, "How dare you call Buddha a dog?" I said, "Well, you obviously don't read the Dhammapada. He is the source of that statement, and you're the big Buddhist." You know? So, yeah. So it's just it really freaks out the mind, because the mind's a doer, and the mind will never understand this because the mind is simply a servant, not a master. Most people are trained to, if you look at your body mind vehicle as like a car that you drive through your term of life and then leave the car and maybe find a new car and drive that one, or just drop the driving on the freeway of life and humanity. uh, you uh, you should use the part of the car that is the doorway of the soul. To drive it is the steering wheel, the heart. But the society reverses that. The brake is supposed to be the steering wheel, and that's the mind. So every time you use the mind, you're always braking, 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 and frustrating yourself because, someday we're not going to say, oh, she is the head of our company. We're going to say she is the heart of our company. The heart is the way. The heart is the way to make the mind a perfect servant, where you just use it when you need it. But the mind as a brake running your life is a terrible master. And so the techniques that I've learned from Osho are the techniques that can help, because there comes a point where talking about it or thinking about it, now we have to apply a certain milieu, create a climate, using the world a bit to create techniques that create a space where unguarded moments of witnessing stir anew in you. And once that starts happening, you'll never want to go back to just being a zombie.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm saying it as a sentence, but I mean it in a very huge Trumpian way, the way he says huge, but thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. And if you want a reading, you could have a reading and we could spend hours talking about this.
Well, actually, I am saving up for that. Thank you. I am.
Okay.
Yep.
I look forward to it.
All
Thank
right,
you
so-
for your questions and your presence.
Thank you.
All right, if anyone else in X Spaces has a question, just ask for the mic and I'll pass it on. Someone did type a question, John, in the chat here on X. 2 questions. Same person. What's your take on this trade war? Is this going to expand to more countries, and which ones? What you said just now was spot on. He's talking like almost an hour ago here. Trump says crazy shit, and then he comes up with a deal. But
Yeah.
do you think he will continue, continue keeping this repeated game?
Well, the question I ask is, when are people going to get savvy to it? I mean, it's amazing. He's been doing this since the 90s, or the 80s, and it's really always variations on a theme. He always first comes in like a bully and shocked, and then he's Mr. Nice and cuddly and loving and wonderful, which he can also be. And people keep not watching the situation. Now, of course, he's going to get an education from the Russians, and and the Russians get him completely. That's why you're not seeing Putin get all upset or reactive to whatever he does. Putin and Lavrov, the foreign minister, always come back because they just clearly, when he talked about the Russians losing 900,000 dead and the Ukrainians 700,000 dead, that shows that Mike Waltz, like so many other American so-called Russian experts, get all of their stuff from Ukraine, which is mostly propaganda. And they're getting it from a government which is basically run, its deep state is neo-Nazism. They got a Jewish president just for, it's nice to have a Jewish president so people can be dumb enough to say, hey, how can it be Nazi when they've got a Jewish president? Well, there were a lot of Jews that were playing boss man in the ghettos, and the ghetto of Lutz had a real big one, and the SS guys were always helping them out. Oh yeah, sure, we'll make more stuff on this slave labor, and then when they were no longer useful, they were annihilated. So it's good to know your history. It's good to know, it's good to find both sides of everything. I think it's very important that. But the trade war, I think I think he's not shooting for a trade war. He's shooting to shock people into just something else. Um, he doesn't want to use sanctions. He's going to find, I think he already is finding, because every time he throws up the whole tariff thing, notice how in all the successes of the last 3 weeks, like he got with his tariff threats to China, he got some leverage there. He now Panamanians being threatened to be put into America again have now lifted the fees on any American ships going through this Panama Canal. And so I think in the next 4 years, I'm going to be spending a lot of time trying to explain the kind of three-dimensional chess chaos, chaos diplomacy, in your face, threatening you with love. Kind of paradoxical, weird thing that Trump's force of nature will be. I call him a full spectrum ego. The good, in fact, somebody else thought about, I can't remember who, I'll try to remember, but it was from the sources, from wonderful sources I have, which I hope if you join the Hogue Prophecy report, I have all my sources there, and I try to get my readers to get turned on to these other sources that have been so accurate in my work. Because this is the real media, which is now starting to grow as the mainstream media is dying off because of Trump coming into office. And now it's time. I know sometimes Trump sometimes gets indirectly, like from Robert Barnes to Don Jr. Robert Barnes will talk about Alexander Mercouris and Alex Cristofaro of the Duran, which are among my top sources. Really good people. Just type in the Duran. Now, you might get a lot of stuff from Duran, but you'll suddenly pop up these two Greeks. And they are just regular guys, and they have a remarkable accuracy. So it came from them, the idea of what was I? It was um, I lost the thread. It was let's see, what were we going to, the way to call Trump. Let's see. Um, I've called him the man of chaos. I've called him, um, um, it's like he's the head of an encounter group, only it's business. He's like, he'll say he's the full spectrum guy. He's going to be, he plays instinctively with his darker sides as much as he plays with his nicer sides. It's amazing because he can be really aggressive, and yet he also can be really tender and loving. And the sad thing is, really, the problem isn't so much Trump. The problem is the habit that people have of just seeing one-dimensional people. And it's really hard for people to understand and fathom Geminis because a Gemini is a contradiction. Walt Whitman, one of the great Gemini poets of the United States, was constantly being told, you're so contradictory. And he says, I'm big enough to contain all my contradictions. And something I learned with Osho all the time, Osho was constantly contradicting himself. Drove people nuts. Constantly people were asking. Of course, he was doing that to kind of disconnect people's minds. But if you were looked at it deeper, and I said, well, what does he never contradict? Because he contradicts everything, but there is something he doesn't contradict. That is meditation. He never said, oh, don't do meditation. It's not, and it was like he was waiting for those who would see that, so he never contradicted being a witness. He never contradicted consciousness. But this world is contradictory. And some people play the contradictions almost on a psychic level, like Trump does. I mean, and I don't think he's thinking about it that much. Again, he's that millipede with 500 legs on the left and 500 legs on the right. And if somebody made him think about how he does what he does, he'd fall on his side and not be able to get up. Trump is that millipede. So it's more interesting to figure out. I mean, trade wars will happen. I don't frankly think that Trump wants to be in a tariff war, and if it doesn't work, he'll change it. I think what's really happening is, and this kind of pugilism and counter group that's going on is really going to end up being a definition of three circles of influence in the world, three great powers. One of them is the United States, which certainly will remain a great power. And I think if it focuses more on its immediate interests, not only will it and a lot of the things that are ruining America and making it too expensive, which Trump is trying to remedy. But the three major powers are America by its own, probably the most singular of the three. The other is Russia, which has become a great power again, as Nostradamus predicted it would, and Edgar Cayce as well, Edgar Cayce thought Russia would be the hope of the world around now by some of the things it's doing that are avoiding World War III and being patient. The things that the Western powers call weakness about Russia are its strengths, its restraint. It realizes it's dealing with a bunch of men children and women children in power in the West. And since they're so immature, but they have nukes, you're not going to react in the same way. They'll just escalate. So we're all alive because the Russians are grown-ups. If the Russians behaved like the EU and NATO, we'd all be dead since 2014. We're all alive now, and that is the hope of the world because Russians are mature. They are realists. They are direct. They understand what they're dealing with. And so slowly, with great patience, when Trump said all that stuff about Russia and how a terrible war is in, they just got to stop it, and they were laughing across 12 time zones. They're just shaking their head. But, they don't close the door on Trump. They just realize Trump is another victim of Western programming. But Trump is sincere. They sense his sincereness. So I'm hopeful that soon he will be talking with Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov, and that soon he will see that he has to also fire General Kellogg's the Frosted Flake of the Cold War mindset, who that man is literally living 30 years behind the times. He must be a senile old general. I don't know. He has his ideas of getting Europeans to guard a no-fly zone, a no militaristic zone in Ukraine. He's not even on the first page. So he's going there again, and they will try again to educate this poor old man to stop being a frosted flake. Kellogg. Because you're going to get nowhere. And frankly, the Russians have the strong hand in the Ukrainian war. They're winning it. The real numbers of Russia losses are, it's an anti-Putin group that the BBC uses called Medusa. And they are Russian activists. They have people all across Russia. Their main base is in Latvia. And they have been going around to all the obituaries across all the 11 time zones of Russia when some soldier is having a funeral for being killed in action. And they are not happy with the numbers they're finding. They want to find the numbers Trump has been told by the Ukrainian propagandists. But the reality is that Russia has probably lost 120,000 dead and 400,000 wounded, of which 90% return to the battlefield because the medical system is not broken like it is in Ukraine. And I can tell you from my own sources in Ukraine, also Americans that were working in Ukraine, it is so corrupt that Americans have brought in trainloads of stuff that would help, instruments, machines that would help in the golden hour save a lot of Ukrainian wounded. But the trains are literally brought in, and then the oligarchs take all of it and put it on the black market and make money. This person, when they lost the stuff they sent, she was walking down a shop area, where buying and selling was going on, and she saw the stuff. She saw it on the benches being sold on the black market. Ukraine has lost, and if you want, you can even see it on satellite, the vast fields, the vast cemeteries with the Ukrainian flags on them. Ukraine has lost probably close to 1 million dead and 1 million injured in this war. And the Russians, 120,000 is a high number. It took America 10 years of Vietnam to get 57,000 dead. Probably a few more in the 62,000 range because of the missing in action. Russia has burned through that in nearly 3 years, 120,000. That's their losses the Russians are taking, but the Russian army that invaded Ukraine in February 2022 with 145,000 is now nearly 1 million. Russia has been building. Russia's industrial base is powerful. It's become the 4th largest economy on the planet. It's not a gas station pretending to be a country. That's the kind of BS that people like the Frosted Flake and the guy who's waltzing all around the truth, Mr. Mike, Missile Mike, those two people have made Trump look like a fool. I think it'll take about 3 times before Trump, because of his narcissistic side, not liking to be seen as a fool, it'll take he's gone through one. It'll probably take 2 more times where he's shown up to be a fool. It'll probably happen during the negotiations as they get more of the reality of Russia and what they're going to do. They don't need to stop this war until they go all the way to Western Ukraine if they want to, and they can. They don't want to. They would rather not have holding all of Ukraine into Russia. But they're ready. They've already planned to fight this war through 2028. They don't want to, but they're planned for it. We can't fight this war another 5 weeks. Ukraine can't fight it another 100 days. So I think Trump is going to pull the plug. I said it on Coast to Coast in New Year's, and I say it again. And George Noory also agreed. I think Trump is big danger that Trump has to look out for. He does not need to have this war, Biden's war, become his war. And I think he's starting to feel the pressure. He needs to resolve this thing in the next 2 months, or it's going to be his war, and it will destroy his revolution and his administration. He will go down like it became Johnson's war, and then it became Nixon's war. He's got to worry. He shouldn't worry about repeating Afghanistan and losing the capital to the Taliban. He needs to worry that this doesn't become Saigon during the Vietnamese War. It's coming close because the Russians, like the North Vietnamese, will come barging into Saigon with their tanks, knocking over the government walls of Kiev, probably in this year. This war will probably be over this year. And so if he doesn't want to be holding the bag, he better soon see that he doesn't have a strong hand in this gamble. And he doesn't need to. He's got more interesting things to do with America and creating this this is a vestige of the dying hegemon, which he's already pushed a pin into and is starting to out. He's got a lot of people that are still holding bad habits, and they'll try to drag him down there. I wish that he would get a real American Russian expert. There are some very good ones, and Tulsi Gabbard's in contact with one of them. He's one of my longest sources since 2002. It's former Marine intelligence major, retired Scott Ritter. You might all first seen him on history's radar screen when he bravely got up before the Senate and argued in early 2003 that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and he should know because he was the chief of weapons inspector for the United Nations that 7 years scoured Iraq and know where all the bombs are and destroyed them. And he said, and if there's any chemical weapons that still remain, their shelf life is past, they're all inert. So Saddam Hussein does not have these weapons. And then we ended up going to war anyway and discovering the hard way that he didn't have it. This man also had extensive experience in the intermediate range missile situation. It was a very dangerous situation, which is returning to us now, where the Soviets and during Reagan's era, and we with our Pershing 2 and 3 missiles, we had intermediate range missiles, nuclear tip, about 2,000 of them, 3,000 of them if you divide the two forces, Warsaw Pact and NATO. And the problem is those missiles are too close together, and if they launch, you won't know if it's a mistake or a fake launch. You have only enough time to respond by firing all of your missiles. And then within 10 minutes, Europe is a nuclear wasteland. And in another 30 minutes, the world is suffering a nuclear winter. And it all could happen in 72 minutes. The end of human civilization. It was that dangerous in the 80s. But in those days, people were more literate and more aware of their news, and they were more demonstrating in the streets. Well, anyway, Scott was somebody who ended up going to Russia in a team of Americans as Russian teams came, Soviet teams came to America in the INF Intermediate Range Missile Treaty to dismantle all those SS-20 Soviet and Pershing 3 missiles. And so both Soviet and American teams went into the heartlands of America and Europe and Russia and were there to monitor and make sure all these things were destroyed. So that's why he got the job as head UN weapons inspector. So he lived in Russia. He married a Soviet citizen, his wife, who was from Georgia, the Georgia Republic of Russia. And he made 2 trips in the last few years where he was trying as an American, proud to be an American. He's a Marine, man. He's not going to fight for Russia. But he started to make a rapprochement as a common man, and also meet with his former Russian opposites that were also dismantling things. And just to make people aware in Russia that there are Americans who get Russia and want to be friends and brothers and sisters with the Russian people. And it's possible. And the answer to all this is he couldn't go on his 3rd trip because the FBI came with a whole team and ransacked his house. But they never gave him it was just a harassment. The kind of thing that Kash Patel is going to end if he gets in. The Federal Bureau of Investigation will not be will finally perhaps become what it was always supposed to be, but never really was. In varying degrees, it's always been a secret police harassing element to it. That could all end. And maybe Scott could go back to Russia again and continue this work of peace. Yeah, I highly recommend you just go scottritter.com. If you want to search his stuff, and then he has all his stuff is out there, and I highly recommend. The man's got a great heart, and he's a remarkably accurate intelligence officer. It just amazes me every time he comes up with stuff. So highly recommend you. If you don't know him already, know him. He's kind of an American that could see us really loving Russians as much as we're very much alike. This is the thing. It's so weird that we got this thing going. It's really silly. And that's what I think, said Professor Gumby with 2 bricks.
We did get another question.
Oh, good.
Chat here. Do you know anything about this Lao Tzu? I don't know.
You mean Lao Tzu?
Lao Tzu?
Yeah, Lao Tzu is a Chinese mystic, lived during the time of Confucius, about around 500 BC, or that around the time of Buddha as well, and in India. And he created the Tao Te Ching, the watercourse way. And it kind of how effortlessness actually brings one to enlightenment more than work. It's another way. The water has a destiny to come out of the mountains, out of the glaciers, and finally go back into a river and disappear into the oceanic. That's the metaphor. Now, the watercourse way, they don't force things. If the river hits an obstruction, it doesn't try to make its way through. It just waits and just witnesses. And the water will always find the place of least resistance and slowly, slowly break through and cause a waterfall and continue its journey to the ocean. So I would highly recommend you all read the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu. He's one of the greatest masters that China produced, as was Li Tzu and Chang Tzu.
Well, I just want to remind the audience, in the description box, you can get the link to John's website, and that website has periodicals that you can sign up for and a reading. You can sign up for a reading. So, John, if you don't mind, maybe go over briefly some of your periodicals, what they get, and also what's involved in a reading.
Well, the first is I have been speaking about the Hogue Prophecy Report, which is something I do roughly at the end and beginning of each month. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more articles, sometimes it's 3. I'm trying to find a nice balance between it not coming out every few months, but a little something coming out constantly. But I'm also trying to juggle all my other projects as well as readings and stuff. So anyway, yeah, you go to hogueprophesy.com. That's HOGUEPROPHECY.com. And you go there and then check out when everything comes out in the report, I send samples. I usually do one free article and samples of the rest in each batch. And then you get to see them. They're fully illustrated. And then, there'll be ads and links in there for you if you like what you're reading. You can become a 12-month subscriber for only $60. You can also do automatic payments, so of like $5 or $10 a month. So and then you can just be on as long as you want and then get off whenever you want. So those are the 2 options. And if you're kind of on a third space with this, the other way is that you can pay for just the one Hogue Prophecy report and see the whole report and see if you find it interesting enough to become a subscriber. That's the third option that I give at hogueprophecy.com. Now, you'll also see a link there, as you see here, the same links on Paul's show. You will see that I do private readings, one-on-one, give this kind of energy all to you. And we use a little bit of astrology. I get you to give me a free astro.com chart, which is the best one for me to use. And also there's along with just direct reading, there's always a tarot reading using the Osho Zen tarot deck. which I saw being painted by Mahadeva Padma. And if you have the deck, I know her. She was in the late 80s. She used to take her acrylic paintings, which were about this big. And when they were done of each card, she would put it in the ashram bookstore so it would dry out and everybody could see it. So I've seen some of these paintings in person that are just wonderful cards. They take the basis of the Egyptian Romany. That's where you get gypsy from. The Romany were from India, but they came to Europe through Egypt. So everybody in Europe called them gypsies, just like Columbus called everybody in Northern and Southern America Indians. Same misnomer, but that's where you get the word gypsy from Egypt. And so, but what this does is it has the same tradition, solid in the tradition of ancient tarot, but it builds a new temple over the foundations. For instance, one of the suits is the Pentacle suit, what it's called the suit of rainbows. And the idea is a whole new way of looking at being firm on terra firma here now, in this moment, feet planted on the earth, and all the ways that this moment can open up to, if you're exactly here now, then where you're standing and the angle of the rain and the angle of the sun makes only you see the rainbows that no one else sees because you happen to be in your alignment with the earth, the sky, in the wholeness of things. So, you have the 10 suits. So there's the 10 ways you can open the door. You have the king of rainbows. You have the queen of rainbows. You have the prince and princess of rainbows. And so the Pentacles gets a whole different sense, a spiritual sense of what it is to be here now in Earth. That's just one example. And so, yeah, so I do those, and those readings can be 90 minutes. They can be longer. So it's good to kind of give some time. I do them usually at 5 p.m. Pacific, but if you're in Europe, I do them at 11 a.m. my time, uh, 7 or 8 p.m. European and Greenwich Mean Time. So, and I do Australia as well. So, just actually, I do it at 5, and it actually works well for Eastern Australia. So, and if you were somewhere else, I mean, I've had readings in the middle of the Pacific and desert islands. It's amazing. I've gone all over the world through this little screen. It's like porthole. I can't step through.
Have you ever done a reading with someone on Antarctica?
Not Antarctic yet, but I have a friend in town here, and she used to have, I think she still has an Antarctic license plate because she's a scientist.
Yeah.
And
It would be cool to be on that, on that expedition for research.
well, yeah, and the thing is, this what I did. It's one of the islands that's a missile testing place. It's like out there. It's probably next to Tarawa, around that area, but any Equoc or something like, I can't pronounce the name. And she actually picked up her camera and she looked right out at the same buildings that I Googled, and there was the palm trees blowing and everything. Like that was quite amazing. But yeah, I've been all over the place.
Cool, that's cool. One of the observations with some of the researchers, if they're there for quite a while, is they actually have a memory loss, and the reason being is that they don't see the sun.
Yeah,
they're not outside and they're not getting sunlight, and so one of the treatments is not just vitamin D, but also iodine. And
okay.
but I remember saying, I don't this there was a documentary about it maybe about 2, 3, 4 years ago that I remember seeing. But there is this memory loss that they have.
Wow. Well,
The
then
ones that
don't they
stay
do
there.
light? Don't they do kind of light therapy as well?
They might, it might work, maybe not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there is something. It's not something very similar to chemo brain when people are on chemo.
Interesting. Well, I can kind of get a taste of it here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it gets And then it truly is the gateway to Alaska because every step farther to the northwest gets more Alaskan.
Right.
The long days, the long nights.
Another thing that popped in my mind when you're talking about frosted flakes, and this is funny, and this is for just a little tidbit for the people that are watching that watch my show regularly. So when I was younger, this is in the 70s, all right. Frosted Flakes was a very common cereal. So was Sugar Smacks was another one that was really common. And so it wasn't uncommon for Gen Xers to be eating these very high sugary cereals for breakfast, right?
Yeah.
For the kids, right? Before they go to school. So we were always having these sugary cereals.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite was Frosted Flakes. So my mother decides, okay, we're gonna get healthier. And she gets Wheaties, right?
Oh,
And
Wheaties.
Wheaties was good, but the thing is that my mother had this sugar bowl on the table in the center. And so I would just take gobs of sugar and put it in the milk that was poured on the Wheaties. And literally I had more sugar on my Wheaties than I had on my on my Frosted Flakes. But what's amazing with milk and sugar, especially when it's like heaping, it really tastes good. And I
Yeah.
probably still have that sugar rush
Yeah.
for the last 45 years. So, but
Well,
that was the first thing that
those
popped
were the
in my
days when
mind.
America was building and expanding, maybe because we were all jacked up on sugar.
But another favorite cereal that I had when I was a kid was Sugar Smacks.
Hmm. Yeah, I know all those. I used to like to go to the little house of pancakes,
Yeah.
And I used to love the pancakes, but always I'd feel afterwards, it's like, God, it tasted good when I was going past my mouth, but then it's like all that sugar and stuff. So I kind of dropped sugar early on, but
And
I
I
do
remember being
enjoy
a
raw
kid.
honey in
I
my
remember,
coffee. I do like to sometimes take a little spoon of raw honey and
yeah.
taste it. That's nice. It's got a
Yeah.
lot of things, honey, raw bee
Well,
honey.
I mean, if you take raw honey a little bit,
Yeah, just
especially during the springtime, and it's your local honey, what it is that the antigens from the pollen, the bees are creating the honey, right? And it's
mm-hmm,
from pollen that's
mm-hmm,
in your environment. So there's antigens literally in the honey. So if you take it only works for local honey. If you take local honey, then you're exposing your immune system in small quantities. So you have built up an immunity to the antigens that are in your local area during the spring and summer season.
mm,
So you can actually adapt your immune system, but it's only if you get local honey. If you just
mm.
get in this mass produce,
Makes sense.
it
Makes sense.
doesn't work.
I
But
think what helped me is I've been for over 20 years taking lecithin with my dinner meal.
yeah,
Lecithin, sorry, lecithin. It used to be used during the time of AIDS to build immune systems, and so I've noticed that the doing it for years, and also doing 5,000 IU of vitamin D. You need it up here
yeah,
um, because there's not a lot of sun. Um, I do that every morning, and then about 3 times a week I do electrolytes, really nice electrolytes. And I stopped having colds like 20 years ago. Sometimes if I think, oh, I'm feeling a little odd, it's a cold, but hardly it's so minor that I go, what's the matter with me today? And then it's gone before I find out. So
yeah.
my immune system's really strong.
That's very good. Okay, well, we've been going on for 2 hours and 22 minutes. But I just
Yeah.
want to remind the audience, we do these shows every other week, sometimes every third week, depending on the scheduling. But we, have these simulcasts with X spaces for the call in, and anyone that wants to chat type questions in the chat box. It's an interactive show, And I greatly appreciate the ones that have asked questions and are listening to the show on X basis. I think John and I enjoy
Yeah,
interaction with the audience.
we love it. It's great. I mean, it's like you inspire me, all your questions inspire.
Great. Okay. Well, I just want to just tell everybody good night. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I will be reposting this video on all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube: Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. So, stay tuned for the premiere. If you want to, have conversations in the chat during the premiere, that would be great. But thank you very much. And so I'm going to end the X Spaces now and then close down the live feed to YouTube. But thank you very much for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, John. I shut down the X Spaces, and for the ones that are watching on YouTube Live, you have to say goodbye to everybody.
I was just thinking, just spontaneously, I remember watching George Bernard Shaw, who was a playwright and very colorful, interesting man. Ray Bradbury used to make a lot of very great science fiction short stories based on him. And it was always funny how he would end a documentary. I think he died in 1950s, and he would just sit there in his chair and he'd go, "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye." Like that. So I thought I'd conjure Mr. Shaw tonight and change it.
But another goodbye take was on SNL with Dennis Miller. I am out of here.
Yeah, Dennis Miller.
He would write that. He would do a big swirl on the table. I am out of here.
I like Dennis Miller. He's good. I haven't seen him on lately.
No, I haven't seen him. I mean, either. I mean, he used to have an HBO show, if I remember.
Yeah.
And
Well, he used to show up, he was kind of the comic relief on Fox sometimes.
yeah, he was tied to football. Wasn't he a football commentator or something for maybe
Oh, I don't
I think it
know.
was Monday Night Football.
I wonder who won. It's probably Kansas City.
No, it was Eagles.
Ah,
Eagles won. It was a blowout. It was something like 40 something to
oh my God.
22 or something.
Oh, I'm pleasantly surprised. I have a book where I have silly statements and stuff, and I'm putting it together. And I have a whole thing of different referee penalties. And like it would say, we have offsetting penalties, we have unnecessary roughness, offset by illegal use of hands. And then and there would be dyslexic ones. But one of the ones that was inspired by the Kansas City Chiefs, it's the old problem. It's a burden when somebody's always winning. I mean, I feel that burden with my presidential predictions for 56 years. I haven't been wrong since 1968. It's almost like I'm waiting finally that maybe the magic breaks, because it can be a burden sometimes. Anyway, so because Kansas City always seems to be in there, there's a new referee penalty, and he steps out before the Super Bowl starts and he says, unnecessary championship victories, 16,000 yards. All the yards of a season. He wiped out the season.
Right.
Well, now they don't have that problem, and I'm happy for them. It's good to lose sometimes.
Right. Well, all right. So thank you very much for being on the show, John. And
Thanks for having me.
we'll be doing this again. And I will remind the audience, please make sure you click the link to John's website, take a look at his periodical and the readings that he does, and sign up for that. Thank you for watching tonight, and stay tuned for the replays. So John, let me do the shutdown here. Let me stop the stream, and then I have to shut down the recording, the backup recording.